Good
Sounds
morning.
good. All right, it's about
Morning,
9:03, and I'll call the meeting to order with the roll. John DeWolf,
Here.
Richard Swisak,
Here.
Rob Lewandowski has another chairman committee meetings, so he's out today, but he did provide all of his review summary. DeAndrea here, Bob Doan.
Here.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Ryan Thompson,
I'm here.
Bob Don,
Present.
and Ken over in the lower left on my screen. Good morning, Ken.
Here, good morning.
So I think what we could do is two things. First, going a little bit out of order as usual, but let's take care of Janita and her report. So that she can go back to work.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, there is no new report for this month. The report is the same as last month. You are the only board that I have that meets on a monthly basis, and I run the reports in 2-month segments because the other boards meet every other month. So there's no new report. I did stop in just to see if there were any issues or concerns that the board has regarding investigations. And if not, I will say have a good day and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay.
I think the next item that we can take care of is a land surveying item, because there's only one. Yesterday, Ken asked me if he could be excused before he dropped the hammer, but I will let him talk about that in a moment. But we did have one land surveying item for a class 13 exam. I don't know if there was any comment or review by the land surveyor members, but technically that would have been a 4-year science degree, 2 years experience and past part 1. This is an applicant, Scott M. Lang Jr. for class 13 license.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second the motion.
So, Ken and Ryan. All those in favor of the motion to approve Scott Lang, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Ken has an announcement to make to the board.
I have decided that it's time for me to resign from the board. I submitted a letter yesterday to the governor, also copied Tony with this information. And I have retired from my business, Gardner and Peterson Associates. My 2 sons, Mark is a PE and Eric is a PELS. They now have full ownership of the business. I do come in periodically at their request to go over jobs with them, but that is about the extent of that. And I'm decided that it's time for me to move on. And I really appreciate everything that you have done for me being on the board for 12 years. And I thank every one of you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. Oh, I'm envious. I wish my kids took over the business.
Well, I didn't push them into it. They just decided to go that way. And
Oh, that's awesome.
we
Good
are.
for you.
It worked out well.
Well deserved. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy retirement, Kim.
Yeah, have a great retirement.
Yeah.
And hopefully nobody will call you to be on the SAMSAC committee.
Yeah.
You hear that, Ryan?
I did.
All right. Well, Ken, you may ride off into the sunset, hopefully happy. And the boys keep making that payment every month.
Yeah, no, they've already taken care of that. That's good.
All
All right,
right.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ken.
Yep,
Good luck.
Yep, thank you.
Good luck,
Bye.
Ken.
Yep, bye.
So
Thanks,
having
Ken.
moved through that, I think we have so many things bouncing around here today. I don't know which one to do first, but maybe we should just take care of the elephant in the room, which is an application that's been hanging on our agenda. It's a very important discussion that we've been having, and it involves a request by Nathan Morrow for reconsideration of his application. The summation of this application has been that we had determined that due to the lack of an undergraduate engineering degree, he did not initially qualify for our qualify with our state policy on licensing. Mr. Morrow has provided additional information dated March 18th, indicating his belief that his extracurricular studies, in addition to his master's degree program and his qualification by NCEES structural engineering exams 1 and 2, should be considered favorably by our board. He also submitted a letter from the dean, I believe the dean or the department chair, Dr. Jerome Hajar, PhD, PE, from Northeastern, indicating how they deliberately offered more courses to supplement what they considered to be deficiencies or recognized deficiencies in the undergraduate degree. He also expounded on why they do a 4-hour course, 4 hours per week course program, in lieu of what we had considered 3-hour course.
I don't buy it. He's listing an incredible number of, what do you call it, these workshop type things, and we decided at the last meeting that those don't count. I don't believe the national engineering evaluation is right. He has basically a physics degree and a master's. And we've been through this over and over. And if we start making exceptions for science degrees as an acceptable way to meet the 4-year engineering requirement, we're just going to have nothing but problems in the future.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I move that, I thought we've already denied them. Do
We
we
have.
need to? Well, I'm.
Actually, John, according to our minutes from last month, we tabled it to allow this to come in. So it's been a reconsideration. I've reviewed it, you've reviewed it. We've taken into account everything that's been offered and stated. So I think your motion is in order at this time.
Okay, I move that it be denied because he does not have a 4-year engineering degree. And because this board feels that the 4-year engineering degree is absolutely essential for the safety of the public.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Richard, thank you. Is there any further discussion on it?
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Morrow. I
Mr.
just
Morrow,
wanted to say
yes.
something.
morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to join you again. I just wanted to reiterate the instructions by the board that I understand the value of a 4-year engineering degree, certainly. And while it states on the board's website, that if you do not have a 4-year undergraduate degree in the United States, that an NCEES evaluation should be performed. And if that is successful, then that is determined to be the equivalent of a 4-year undergraduate degree. And I am dismayed that both the letter from my professor, the board has decided that, my semester hours do not qualify as 4-hour courses, even though they are 4-hour courses. I went to Northeastern University. It's a well-known engineering school. So I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Northeastern graduates that are Connecticut PEs, and they would be dismayed to hear that the course of study is not determined to be adequate for engineers. And it did pass the NCES evaluation. And I'm frankly confused as to why it's not being accepted.
Mr. Morrow, I think the difficulty we have is that for the last 20 years, we've been enforcing our policy or imposing our policy that we have to require the 4-year undergraduate degree. And it's been a consistent application by this board. And that's where we are having a problem. There'll be another application later on this afternoon. It's going to be in the same situation. And there have been many before. And so our member, John DeWolf, is an educator, a structural engineer. He understands their credentials of having passed both exams, but our problem is being consistent with our prior decisions on many applications. And that's where we have a concern.
Okay, I would just encourage the board then to reevaluate their application process and information in the application that says you can have it evaluated by NCES, and to remove that because it seems like that's unnecessary.
I will add that I don't see how NCEES actually came up with the 48 credits, because per their policy, courses that are taught in the engineering sciences and design area need to be taught in engineering. They've given you 8 credits for 2 courses that were taught at Bowdoin, which were part of your physics program, which don't meet that requirement. And I will once again state that a normal master's degree is 10 courses, 3 credits. Every one of your courses is getting 4 credits, and that just doesn't ring true.
I understand. And
I understand you've got a lot of ability and you know what you're doing, but the 4-year degree is meant to ensure that somebody has breadth. The biggest concern I personally have is that so much now is done on the computer, and without that background, a lot might slip by. And our job is to protect the public. And this board has decided that we can no longer allow experience and other ways to meet the 4-year engineering degree. And I'm sorry.
I understand, and I wanted to reiterate the letter from NCES. When the board first asked them to reevaluate, they stated that those courses from Bowdoin were counted 10 years ago when I first had it evaluated in order to become an EIT in Massachusetts, and that they would have done it differently currently. However, it still would have met the standard because they would have counted 2 courses in mechanical engineering that I did at Northeastern. And therefore, all 48 credit hours were completed under the engineering courses at Northeastern University, as stated in the NCES letter.
I'd highlighted that several times in different versions of the correspondence, and I don't know if that's just posturing, but they can't appreciate our condition, and I think there's a movement afoot to eliminate all licensing, and we don't want to be in that boat, and therefore we're trying to maintain our consistency with our policy that has been imposed. And John has, studied this back and forth, and as an educator and as a structural engineer, he fully understands where you are professionally and otherwise. So I'm afraid we're in this position of having to be consistent with our policy, and I think that's been evident in our decisions on other applications. So I think it's time to take it to the vote.
In the end, we're not saying you cannot do structural engineering design. What we're saying is, though, it will need to be signed by a licensed engineer.
Understood.
All right, any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded by John DeWolf and Richard Swezak to deny the request for licensure under our current standards and policies. All those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Nate, appreciate where
Thank you,
you're coming
gentlemen.
from in this situation, but the vote has been made and it's going to stand as presented. Right? Thank you. I think at this time, it would be appropriate to also take into consideration the request of Mr. Rice, Stephen Rice. Is
That's
Jane, yeah.
Which is that C3? Yep, I got
This
it.
is item C3. Thank you, John.
Yep,
Item
I got
C3.
Okay.
This is a request for a Class 2 exam, which I believe the history, if I'm not incorrect, is that he had applied to take the exam in Jane, do you mind giving me back the history that you sent this morning? I was caught a little bit off schedule yesterday by having been traveling, so this came in somewhat late on my agenda, but my understanding is that we had approved it once before, but the exams were not taken. Now he's applying to take the exam. It's a 3-year, right?
I've reviewed this again. He has an associate's degree, which I think is a 2-year degree. He does not have a 4-year degree in engineering, which has been the policy of the board. So I would recommend that it be denied, that he be denied.
Is there a
I'll
second?
Yep.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Richard, thank you. So any further discussion? Again, following our policy and the discussion just had regarding Mr. Morrow. We are,
I will go ahead and say, the board approved people without degrees many years ago. And this is a case that goes back many years. And just because we did it then doesn't mean we're required to do it now. We are enforcing the model law requirement of a 4-year engineering degree, and we need to be consistent. He should have taken the exam back when he was approved.
right. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to deny the application for Class 2 exam by Stephen Rice due to a lack of 4-year education, 4-year engineering degree, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Okay, with that, given the
We have one,
members, what was that?
Tony, we have one more. C1, Perez.
C1. Bear with me a moment.
Yeah, it's me, Omar Perez. Key to application you're looking for.
What is I'm sorry, I'm lost on C1 right now.
It's Mr. Perez. I have reviewed it and I can comment when ready.
Okay. Making a few notes here. I'm behind a little bit.
That's fine. Take,
Oh, Perez, I'm sorry. I am. I got it. C1. Yes, sir. Okay, John, thank you.
okay, he has a BS in environmental science from Marist College. I don't even think they have an engineering program, but I'm not positive of that. The NCEES is evaluated and it once again, like our previous case, have come up with 48 credit hours, but I don't think this should have been evaluated that way because 4 of the courses to meet the 48 credit hours are from Marist College. One is environmental assessment, one is environmental chemistry, one is plant physiology, and one is toxicology. And these are not engineering courses. So if you remove those courses, which count for 14 credits of the 50 NCES gave them, he's down to 36. But nevertheless, again, it's a 4-year non-engineering degree plus a good master's. I'm not denying that. It's a very good master's degree, but that doesn't in any way equate to a 4-year undergraduate engineering degree, which is the model law requirement. It's very, very similar to Mr. Morrow's case that we just looked at.
If I may, Mr. DeWolf, actually model law was updated in 2021 to allow a pathway for licensure for individuals like myself. If you look at model law 2021 and in the current version, August of 2023, as I provided in my letter on April 3rd, there is a subsection that provides a pathway for licensure for engineers who did not attend an ABET accredited school that have had their education evaluated by NCES. And in the engineering education standards of NCES, they state that bachelor's degrees in related sciences are accounted for when they do their evaluations. So according to NCES, I had 50 hours of engineering credits based off their guidelines.
I think what that applies to is engineering degrees that are not accredited, not science degrees.
No, it does say related sciences and a master's when coupled with a master's in engineering in the wordage. So that's why I felt based off as Mr. Morrow pointed out, the guidelines posted on the state website state for an undergraduate degree in not engineering and when coupled with a master's degree, if you must have your degree evaluated to show at least 48 credit hours of engineering by NCES. So based off the guidelines provided on the state's websites and by NCES, I felt that I fulfilled the state requirements.
I think what Mr. Perez is saying is that they're trying to find other pathways. It used to be in our board prior to our policy of more than 20 years to require the 4-year undergraduate engineering curriculum was that a master's would often be considered as qualifying, if you will, whatever undergraduate program there was. Oftentimes it was applied to foreign degrees before NCEES was doing evaluations. And since that time, however, we've not allowed that. In other words, we have to be satisfied, or we have made it our policy to be satisfied that in fact we had a 4-year undergraduate degree in Connecticut. There are other pathways perhaps in other states. Some states still allow a verbal, interview. We just don't do that, Omar. That's the problem we have.
No, but
So-
I guess 2 points is it's as Mr. Moore pointed out, it's not what's explicitly stated on the website. It states an undergraduate degree in non-engineering can be accepted. And 2, policies are meant to be changed. And there's been policies throughout the US history that, for whatever reason, they were there and, they've changed. I'm sure I could come up with a great one right now, but I'd rather not. I don't want to upset anyone.
The problem is that it also says on their site that courses that are not taught in engineering programs should not count.
I
And
mean, that's,
where you've got.
We lost
four-
you, John, we lost that for a moment, yeah.
Okay, it says that courses that are not taught within an engineering program should not count. And there are 4 courses here that are certainly not taught within engineering program. And regardless, I mean, you have a great master's. There's no question about that. I'm familiar with Stevens, but the problem is that you just don't come up to the 4-year engineering degree. And as I said with the last person, with today's current practice, where so much is done on the computer, we really need to see, for the safety purposes, that a student has a much broader background, and the 4-year degree provides that. Your program does not.
again, not to rehash a point, but anywhere it does not state a 4-year degree, not even, like I stated, the updated NCS model law provides a pathway for individuals that didn't have the opportunity, for whatever reason it may be, to have attended a 4-year ABET accredited undergraduate program. And in my perspective, I bring a lot of different perspectives when I work with my colleagues. It provides people to learn new perspectives. Maybe I bring something that someone else doesn't have in terms of when attacking a problem. And two other comparisons you can make is, to be a lawyer and to be a doctor, you don't necessarily have to go pre-med or be a history major to become a lawyer or doctor. They allow pathways for, people with different backgrounds to obtain these careers. And I believe the board should, understand where NCES is coming from and, possibly consider changing a perspective. The world's changing. The world's different now.
The world is different, but in your analogy to the legal profession or the medical profession, you don't start at cataract surgery. You have to go through the medical school, which is your 4-year program. And that's, I think that was a little bit of a weak comparison, but
Technically, your undergrad could be in anything as long as you meet the educational prereqs to get into med school. My
understood.
fiance-
But then you start med school. You're not doing the last 2 years of med school and becoming a brain surgeon. So that's our point. And I think that John's made it several times, and we've made it many times over the last more than 20 years. So I know that things are changing, but we need to be consistent in this state because the other jurisdictions are not. And that's just our policy, and we've maintained it throughout. And I know it makes it difficult for some people, but at least we have to be consistent for all those who came before you.
Can I ask I have a question. Mr. Perez, when was the NCEES evaluation completed?
August 25th of 2023.
2020, okay, it's a recent one.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, understand the requirements. So I actually talked to, I had it conducted in 2023, and I was trying to understand the regulations in the state of Connecticut, and based off everything I read, I felt that I met the requirements. So I had it completed, and it took me a while to finish my application.
Part of our problem is that our regulations were written, I think, 70 years ago. And it was very open-ended. It was very different times when the regulations were written. And that was pre-computer. The computer has changed so much. And I think as an engineer for the better, of course. But our regulations state you can meet requirements in many different ways, provided the board feels that what was done is equivalent. At this stage, and for the last 20 years, this board feels that without that 4-year engineering degree, we cannot find all the other items equivalent.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
So based on NCES's evaluation, I'm just throwing some ideas. I'm technically at 50 credits of engineering hours. If I take away the mayor's engineering or the mayor's hours that were accounted for, that brings me down to 48. If I am able to find or attend UConn, because I understand you taught at UConn, or another accredited engineering school and make up that 10 credit hour difference, would the state be open to allow me to possibly sit for the PE exam once I meet those 48 hours?
I think it's very difficult to say, if you
Well-
meet certain things, we will do it. We would have to evaluate at the time.
Okay, I guess I'm just going based off what you're stating to a certain degree, and then trying to see other ways, trying to find means and methods.
Omar, the short answer to that, I think, is a short response is that in the past, there have been many applicants who went into the master's program with the understanding that they needed to have some supplemental courses, and they deliberately did that. So if that helps you, well, we can't predispose in this case. Certainly a deliberate effort to cover some of the deficiencies would be considered as positive.
Yeah, I'm so close, and I've worked
Yes.
so hard to get there, and I'm just like, this is the final barrier I'm trying to overcome. I'm ready to be a PE. I know I'm ready to be a PE. It's so close, but so far. So,
Is there any further discussion? Richard, Bob, John?
No, I agree. I agree that, if he supplements his courses and eliminates any deficiencies, it would be a lot easier to make a positive decision towards, his, being able to sit for the exam. It's just a numbers game, but somehow it seems that we need to be consistent, just so that we are fair to all the other applications that have come before us, and we're consistent with our decision making. Because once we deviate from that, it's going to be difficult to go backwards or back to being consistent. Because once you break that chain, it's done. You have to be more in line with the decision, the latest decision that you made. So
I
in
guess,
that sense, we can't go backwards.
can I bring up one more point, I guess? Well, in January, a decision was tabled on my application pending, clarification from NCES to make sure I was adherent. I followed model law, and I guess based off my last try, but based off everything I provided, I met model law. So I guess I'm trying to understand how my denial relates back to the 4-year degree if model law provides that pathway.
Well, I guess in that case, it comes down to an interpretation of NCAAS thought that under the circumstances, they felt it might be consistent. And our position is that consistent with our policy requires a 4-year degree. So we can have a difference of opinion as to what we think as a board is the minimum requirement for Connecticut.
Yeah, but I guess going back to the letter, it states, or I actually didn't receive a letter in January, but it states, or the meeting minutes state that it was pending NCES clarification, not a 4-year degree. I'm just trying to be consistent with the outcome. Like, am I being based off my 4-year degree, or am I being based off NCES consistency, model law consistency?
I think the interpretation is you're being evaluated against Connecticut policy.
So I guess I'm going back to January, and that's two different decisions.
Now, back in January, we asked for a clarification from NCAAS as to what they considered. And if they stated, as they stated, under their interpretation, they might be acceptable. But in our situation, it's inconsistent with our policy. So that's where we have a problem. So,
And looking at the evaluation again, 4 of your courses were taken in an undergraduate science program that were not engineering courses. They gave you credit, we would not.
Well,
So
yeah,
in that case, you only have 36 of the 48 required.
I think I had 50, but
Yeah,
But-
I'm deducting You have 14 credits in an undergraduate program that is not engineering, and you have 36 credits in an engineering program that is engineering. So you're short of the 48 by 12.
I guess to go back to NCS, I mean, I provided them, transcripts, course descriptions, everything they requested. So I believe they've done a thorough analysis of my education. I don't mean to bring it up, but I think you're judging my courses without having much understanding of what they actually entailed. Just based off the names of environmental chemistry, assessment, toxicology.
I fully understand how you feel, but as I say again, we go back to this four-year engineering degree that the board has been insisting upon. And we are consistent. And it doesn't mean you can't practice engineering, but you will need somebody to sign off.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second to deny the applicant for class 1 exam due to a lack of qualifying undergraduate engineering program. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion?
I'm good.
All those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Thank you for your time, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you for speaking with us. Why is NCEES becoming so liberal? It's
There's-
not meeting the original requirements.
It's interesting also, John, in that the other part of the model law changes that they're proposing is, and I believe it becomes effective in 25, but we'll have to double check it. And we got the Northeast Zone meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. Is that they're also requiring the BS plus 30. So right off the bat, you're recognizing that you need to strengthen the program. So why weaken it? It doesn't make sense, does it? Now, if the master's then is deliberately, or a mechanism, if you will, for supplementing the deficiencies that were in a chemistry or environmental science degree, then maybe that's appropriate now, right?
Yeah.
So that would be I think a consideration that we could make going forward.
Tony, let me put it in my perspective, not being an engineer.
Yes,
They're
sir.
just raking confusion. They've got one group that's taking it backwards and another group that's taking it forwards.
Yes.
One group is saying, oh, they got all the requirements, but he doesn't have a degree. Okay. And you got another group saying, we're going to have to require a master's because they're taking the bachelor program and they're narrowing it down. It's not as intensive as we want. So to me, the organization needs to get its act together, plain English.
And that's the frustration when I've been attending these meetings, is that I echo exactly what you just said. It's like you got, well, I'll go back to this one meeting where I asked everybody in our Northeast Zone to physically state on the record, do you grant waivers of the exam? Do you grant waivers of having an undergraduate degree? And there was not one jurisdiction could say that they didn't grant waivers, that they universally required a 4-year undergraduate degree. And it hasn't gotten any better. What they keep doing, as I said, you recognize that the curriculums are all reducing in the number of credits, and then you want us to do masters as a minimum, and yet you're willing to accept a chemistry degree toward engineering. Then we'll have another discussion in a couple of weeks. It's in May 2nd or something. But that's it. Al hit it on the head. Initially, you say, blame it on the educators. They want the master's program, so more guys have to go to school. You extend the program. You diminish the undergraduate and you extend the postgraduate. What's the rationale for that? It's a business at the end of the day.
If we waver from our requirement of the 4-year degree, we're gonna create nightmares for ourselves.
Yes,
We
sir.
just gotta hold to it. That's it.
And it's frustrating for the applicant, and I'm sure, as John points out, you have a great master's program, but it's inconsistent with the undergraduate. You know, I think the analogy to the medical and the legal professions was weak, and unfortunately, again, yes, you studied history, well, and you may have taken
Apples and oranges. It's
biology.
not the-
That's a great segue into medicine. But then they said you start from the beginning in the medical school. That's why it's 4 years and then 2 more years. In the legal profession, you take all the base courses in your law degree. You don't get to eliminate your law degree because you took philosophy. You know, that doesn't make sense. So
The
I think that
medical-
was a weak analogy in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. The medical school degree basically provides pretty much everything you need, but it does require undergraduate science courses. And then they do everything that you need, whereas a 4-year engineering degree originally was intended to provide everything you need for practice. So you're comparing the 4-year engineering undergraduate degree with the 4-year medical degree that's done after another program.
Yeah.
I thank you, Al. That puts it very clearly. And we really need to be consistent. And I'm sorry that other boards don't see this.
Yeah. It's just.
Jane, in
We-
the
we-
in
we-
the
we've created
transcript,
an
I
absolute
think
nightmare
that
for
we have to be
ourselves.
careful with what is transcribed, and I think you also put some emphasis on Al's summary. Those are, good points, and they should be in our minutes. Okay. Shall we finish our land surveying? I mean, our old business on the land surveying discussion and the new datum, if Ryan has some new information. And one of the, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, nothing's really new, just except that we're having a meeting this Friday. Bob, Don, I'm not sure if you were brought into that conversation. I think Bob Doan was, and it was supposed to be you. So
They corrected that, Ryan.
Okay. So there's going to be a meeting on Friday, and it'd be nice to have a conversation there and start moving this forward. But that's really the only update.
Okay.
I
Can I
told
ask,
what's
can
his
I
name,
ask, can
Paul.
I ask a question? Last time around, I admitted to half listening to this. What's the emphasis for the change here?
Yeah. So real quick, essentially, the datum, so NOAA and NGS are updating their datum. All right, so that's one thing. Also, the international foot versus the U.S. survey foot is becoming the acceptable measurement for the foot, and it's a very negligible difference, but there is a difference, and over obviously a large distance, it matters. So those two things they do need to be updated in our code. And then in addition to that, there's some other conversations we've been having in CALS about providing some sort of standards for GPS and specifically network, RT in GPS, because right now our regulations, the standards apply to, traditional methods of surveying, and don't really cover GNS use. So those three things are the big parts of the discussion, and then thrown in there, because if we're going to be looking at the regulations, we'd also like to talk about changing the fines for people practicing surveying without a license, because right now it's a fairly small fine. It's happening quite extensively, enough that we talk about it, once every couple of months at CALS meetings. And it's a problem with, people hiring somebody who's unlicensed, getting work done, and then not really having a recourse because if it goes to DCP, they get $1,000 slap on the wrist, they pay it, they move on, and they keep doing it. And so we want to talk about addressing that. So those are the summary of the four main key items. And I think there's also some items that this board wants to discuss that we probably need to
Well,
hash out.
when I decided to look at it, I go back into the 70s where we were going to all switch to the metric system and inches. And now we have out there, we never really switched over. And now, as you know, we've got 2 different wrenches and 2 different screwdrivers and everything. And, so I was just wondering if we're going to end up in that kind of nightmare situation on this.
Well, I can't say we won't, but I don't think it's quite the same situation. That the datum changes every so often, and over time, as you know, from 1929 to 1988, and et cetera. So that's not going to create the same situation. But the difference between the U.S. Survey foot and the international foot, yes, there probably will be some pain for a decade or two, I think, until that all gets resolved. But I do think ultimately it is good to have a standardized foot that's consistent.
Yeah, well, again, looking at from a layman's viewpoint, not being the engineer or the surveyor and everything, that's, I can relate back to what happened back in the 70s. And, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh, here we go. I got 2 different screwdrivers coming my way again,
Yeah, I understand. I think the really though, from the perspective of this board, we're not necessarily trying to change things. We're just staying current with what's being changed, nationwide. In terms of this is, I don't want to belabor it or pontificate here, but
then I go back to Philadelphia where Penn set up Philadelphia and he had one chain and then he ordered another one from Great Britain and got the wrong dimensions. So you go in the center of Philadelphia and the beats don't come together. Okay, and we worked for a company, happened to own a piece of property that had that problem, and I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't. And found out that, someone didn't check the standard, I guess.
Well, you're right, Al. The change in datums is something that keeps surveyors awake at night, believe me, especially on the coast. So we have to be very careful to Ryan's point. Okay, that's good news, good information. So please keep us posted. All right. And since we're on page 2 of the regular agenda, and Jane had asked this, it's a good question. How long do we maintain our decision? And there's really no quick answer to that, but Mr. Rice is a good example. What we thought based on what we knew had to change. So can we impose a time limit? We don't have a time frame on an EIT. You pass the EIT, move on, and it stays. You did it. But we haven't ever imposed a time limit on that. Can we do it on an application? We've raised the question a couple of times. If a guy goes and stops working in the engineering profession for 3 or 4 or 5 years, has he lost his edge? But we allow him to put in a new application and proceed. We had that last month. Anyway, any thought or comment on?
I think that basically we need to be consistent, and we're now reviewing applications differently than we did 25 years ago. And I was on the board then. And so consequently, if you get approved at one point in time and the board changes their policies on how they review applications, you've got to be subject to the new approach.
Right. In the case of our local zoning as a surveyor, when the regulations change, we have to comply. And that's the situation here. So every case is individual and every decision has to be based on the knowledge that we have at the time. And if okay, so I would say we really can't impose a time frame on it. We have to look at it under current conditions and statutes and regulations. Our regulations may change as a result of what Ryan's doing. And then we have to look at it in that context. So, is there a consensus on this? I think we can't impose a time frame because we don't know. We can't, what do we call it? You can't, what's the word I want? You can't mortgage the future of an applicant coming in on a different regulation.
Right. I think we just need to review applications based on current policy.
Right.
Yeah.
So would that be a motion you'd like to make, John?
Sure. That applicants are subject to current policies of the board, even if they made their application years ago. Does that make sense?
But consider applications under the current policies of the board and changes that may occur in the model law. You know, the model law can become more stringent. So again, I think simply consider the application under regulations in effect at the time.
And is this going to be our policy for both engineering and land surveying?
Yes,
Applications?
Yeah.
Okay, so the land surveyors should vote on this then.
Yes, sir.
Right, good point.
So consider applications in context with the regulations in effect at the time of the application.
No, at the present time.
At the present time of the application. In other words,
At the present time of the application review.
right, that's what I said.
Right.
Consider the application against regulations in effect at that time.
Well,
Right.
yeah, at the time of review, because if it's at the time of the application, then
Okay, at the time of review.
Decisions are made based on the current regulations and policies.
I'm not sure where we are at this point. Are we struggling to do something here that doesn't need to be done?
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's another aspect. Jane raised the question, should we have any policy like that? And the answer is no.
No.
Okay, simply not. We don't even know what the board's gonna be like in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. So I think it goes unstated. Look, these are the regulations. We're looking at it in context. And therefore, it does not need to be codified.
I like that.
So no motion is required. We've had a discussion. I don't think it requires a motion. It's an understanding that we're dealing with applications as they come in, just as we have the majority of us sitting here today for over 20 years. Enough said?
Yes.
So the minutes can show that we had a discussion on it and the consensus was there's no need to change current policy. And then just moving along in our agenda on page 3, we have a list of candidates who passed the CBT NCAAS exams between February, well, I don't know what month that was. I guess it's January and March of 2024. There's a good cross section of disciplines. That's just for notation. And that moves us into our regular agenda applicants for class 1 and.
I'm sorry. I don't think we ever approved the minutes from last month.
We didn't do that yet, no.
Okay.
I was gonna leave it, but we can do it. And the reason I was leaving it was it didn't matter, I guess, at the time, because Ken and Rob are not here. So let's do that, Ryan. That's a good point. So we have our minutes from last month, March 12th. I did note in the minutes that we had a decision to table the discussion with Mr. Morrow, which allowed him to approach the board again with additional education records for review. We did accommodate that request and made a motion to deny today. Other than that, I did not see anything of note.
I read through them and I will move approval of the minutes of March 12th, 2024.
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion in which I will add some discussion? It's just that we had noted on page 9 of those minutes of March 12th that Al had raised a question about whether or not continuing education could substitute for the basic engineering degree. And at that time, the board's consensus was that a general CE will not substitute for engineering requirements. That was discussed earlier today and basically applied to the reconsideration for Mr. Morrow. I think that's important to note.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I didn't get the move and seconded on the minutes. I'm sorry. Who made the motion?
I
John,
did.
I'll second it.
Okay, Richard. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented for March 12th, 2024. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right. So we do have a supplemental agenda, but we'll get to that. So and now we are moving toward page 4 of our regular agenda. The applicants for Class 1 exam, credit part 1, reviewed by John DeWolf, Alvarez through Tremper.
Can I leave at this point, Tony? Sorry to interrupt. Bob Don?
Yes, sir. You want to leave? You
Yeah,
may.
if we have no other things
Yeah.
other than engineering applications, I might as well.
No, there was no other direct surveying issues. You're right. So thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Bob.
Have a good week, gentlemen.
Take care, Bob.
You too, Bob.
So John
Okay.
Alvarez through Tremper for Class 1 credit
I
part.
move approval. They're all model law. They meet the requirements
Is there a second?
for the full group.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Who said that?
Al,
Thank you, Al. You didn't light up. All those in favor of the motion to approve Alvarez through Tremper, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. John reviewed another applicant, Mabra, for Class 2 exam.
He has a Pakistan degree in 2014 and an MS from Louisiana. He practiced in Pakistan and has 1.5 years practicing in Connecticut. His evaluation of his undergraduate degree shows he's missing 2 hours of general education, but he's otherwise fine. I move approval.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And then John continued with the Class 2 exam, credit part 1 for 2 applicants, Luciano and Raghavan.
Okay, the first one has a Dominion Republic bachelor's degree, and it was reviewed with no deficiencies. The second one has an a degree, bachelor's degree from India and a master's from UMass. And again, his undergraduate degree was reviewed and there were no deficiencies. So I move approval of both for Class 2 exam credit part 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that motion carries.
I just want to add, thanks, Jane. You're doing a great job putting these together.
Yeah. Yeah. The spreadsheet is extremely convenient. I reviewed the next group of applicants for Class 4 reciprocity on page 5 of the regular agenda, Alam through Chan. I always like to count them up. Out of the 16 applicants, there were only 4 non-model law. 12 of the 16 had master's degrees. And for what it's worth, there were 5 women. And majority of them were structural, which I think is a good thing. But that's just my opinion. All duly licensed in other jurisdictions and good experience, in my opinion. Therefore, if there's a motion to accept my recommendation, I would appreciate it.
So
Thank you,
moved.
Richard. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Robert. All those in favor of the motion to approve Alam to Chan for reciprocity, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. The next group of applicants for class 4 reciprocity was for Chen through Ricks, reviewed by Richard Swizak.
I'll make a motion that we approve the entire group. Just some footnotes is that Chen had a degree from non-model law, but had a degree from China that was equivalent. D. Ayla had a degree from Canada, from the University of Manitoba. So he was non-model law, but it was equivalent. And G. Gurgenti, unfortunately got disciplined by the state of Tennessee for not renewing his professional registration. So he was non-model law, but the rest of them were model law. And the only other thing that we need to check is that Joshua Hartley has, just to verify his fundamentals from the state of Georgia. But otherwise, everything is acceptable.
Okay, is there a second to the motion to approve, subject to
Second.
verification of Dworick?
Second,
Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Bob Lewandowski reviewed the applicants for class 4 reciprocity on page 5 and 6. He has noted all are in accordance with our regulations and policies. Let's see. There's only three non-model law, that's all. And he doesn't understand why on one, McCormick, only because it was his degree was very old, but everything in regard to experience and education was appropriate. So regardless, in simple terms, Rob Lewandowski recommended approval of all the applicants, Judge and Kafalidis rather, on page 5, and Kodumuro through Alagmuller on page 6. Is there a motion to accept his recommendation?
So moved.
so
Thank you, Robert. Is there a second?
second,
Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carried. Okay. So the next group of applicants for class 4 reciprocity was Olszewski through Ukaga, reviewed by Bob Doan.
Okay, Ukaga has, after graduation, has 3 years, 9 months of experience. And I could make a motion to approve it subject to continued employment, or we could table it until he has those 3 months experience.
I would table my personal opinion.
All right,
But
I agree. I would like to table Ukaga.
Okay, is there a motion? A second to the motion?
Because he needs 3 more months of experience.
So he can reapply for our next meeting or
Yep.
whenever. What was when did the application?
Pardon me?
What was the end of the application experience?
It was, the end was last month.
Right, so he's got to wait a couple of 2
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, the date of the application was March, I believe.
Right, Okay, so there's a motion to table decision on Nukaga due to a lack of experience following the degree. All those in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Just a question. So this is a class 4, so he is registered in another state with
Yeah,
less than 4
yes.
years of experience?
Yeah, and he has he has other license. He has a current license. He's a non-model law because he did not have 4 years after graduation.
Huh.
And this is what these guys down there are also saying. They call it decoupling. Take the exams. You pass the exams, you can be licensed. That's what their policies are.
Yeah.
You see, they're trying to move that through, decouple. Take the exam whenever. Then you haven't got any practical experience. Just contrary to logic.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. So it's been moved and seconded. That's actually been
Approved.
I don't know. I lost track.
The motion was approved.
Right, motion was approved.
Sorry for confusion. It's just that I was confused. I'm over there, huh? Does he just need 4 years of degree just to get model law or become a licensed?
Yeah.
Well, anyways,
Yeah,
okay.
he's licensed in 4 other states.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not sure why everybody's in a hurry to get licenses in all these states in terms of, basically, from my experience, you need the experience just to get used to doing engineering. I look at some of these applications and they don't have, to me, unless they're very, very, good at engineering, you just don't have enough background. You need a lot of background to make good decisions.
When I look at the experience record, I scan the beginning. 15 years ago is not as important as the last 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. Are you still doing the same work? Are you moving every other year from company to company? That's
Right.
disconcerting, right? But
Correct.
or at least I presume that. I think that's important. You have to have the experience. So question, just real quickly, out of curiosity, if you have it handy, what were the other 4 states? So when we start talking about this in a couple of weeks, I'll know who I'm talking to.
Arizona,
Okay.
Richard's home state, Colorado, Minnesota, and Texas.
Well, it's an interesting group. So, Arizona's trying to eliminate or being forced to eliminate registration. I have to follow that up a little more based on what Mr. Zygmunt was implying. I've heard rumors of that. I didn't know it was getting worse. So I'll have to follow up. But anyway, that's interesting to know. So the Western states are moving to have more reciprocity, so they don't really care how you got your license. And that, again, that's a problem. And yet they're the ones who are insisting that every surveyor, now that the surveyors are gone, understand public lands, whereas the East Coast guys don't need or want to know it.
You know what?
It's interesting.
You know what I noticed is again, just out in Colorado, when I do go there, and I will be there next month, so I'm glad we don't have a meeting. But what I have noticed is that, basically, they've been changing the registration requirements for like a nurse, in terms of if a nurse is a nurse, especially during the pandemic when they needed nurses, they didn't want to get bogged down in the bureaucracy of having the nurse to get re-registered. So they sort of just said, okay, a nurse can get re-registered. And then a hairdresser who, doesn't matter, a hairdresser, what their skills are, the worst they can do is give you a bad haircut. So I think that, they're getting confused with the service industry, and they're lumping the engineers in with the hairdressers and, other disciplines that aren't necessarily that technically involved. But all of a sudden they're saying, well, as long as they need to be registered, let's not, get all the information from the technical people and just group them in with the hairdressers. And that doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's where, the lack of knowledge of the people making decisions are just grouping, disciplines in with things that shouldn't be, grouped with
Right.
another discipline.
I agree.
Until something happens.
Yeah,
Correct.
I think
Correct.
I think
They have a
another
problem.
thing.
Then they're gonna start pointing fingers at each other. Who did what, you know?
Right.
I think
But I
another
think,
thing that's driving this is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Richard.
no, I think that, that's just my observation.
I think another thing that's driving this is the recent switch to a lot of remote work and the gig jobs like Upwork, where you can get a job in Oregon and you're sitting in, Florida. And so there's a lot of people that are trying to get licensed in every state so they can do all kinds of work. And, I think there's a potential problem there. If you're not able to go see a site, that can be challenging. But then I have mixed feelings on that too. So.
well, it's an issue, and it's getting. I think the regulations overall are getting challenged, and that's a problem too. So we'll see. All right, Bob, you have to finish your job from Molzewski to Trezino.
Terzino. I make a motion to approve all 15 for class 4 license.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Uh,
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Ryan Thompson reviewed the next group for class 4 reciprocity, Walters through Yunnan.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve Walters through Jiao, XIAO.
Okay,
The first 5 of them were all model law. Jiao was not, but plenty of good experience, the equivalent degree, master's degree in mechanical engineering. So all of them, I would motion to approve.
was there a motion to accept Ryan's
I'll-
recommendation?
I'll make that motion
Yes, Richard?
just to supplement as a sitting board member.
Right.
Yes.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Robert. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries, which leaves us to Yunnan.
Yeah, so Yunnan is, and it may be an approval, but it's another one of those that my lack of experience on this board leads me to want to ask questions here. He has a degree from the University of Baghdad, which was, hold on, let me find it. I believe it was, yeah, it's not equivalent because he's missing 6 hours in math and science, but he has 101 out of 48 101 and only needs 48 in engineering. He has a master's degree also from the University of Baghdad. So that's one concern. But I know that in the past you've said that the science degrees, it says missing biology or chemistry. So I know in the past you guys have said that that's not a huge issue. But the other concern is he's only got 1 year and 6 months of experience under a licensed engineer. He has a total of 12 years and 8 months of engineering experience, but only 1.5 under the direction of a licensed engineer. So I guess I'll just, that's the info, and I'll let you guys, tell me, discuss it from there.
What kind of experience, Ryan, was his 12 years?
Well, it was engineering, but it was a lot. So, well, and I'll get to another thing that's just an interesting side bit, but it all has to do with like transit and rail signal design. It looks like really decent experience. Lots of different projects all over the world, Panama City, New York City. And he's also been, so this is another aside, and this is just more of an interesting note. He has references from a gentleman that also referenced another one of the applicants in the supplemental, and that applicant is one of his references. So Michael James Louder, who works for what is it? VHV, VHV, I think. Gave him a reference. And then a guy named Dhruv Sharma gave him a reference. And Dhruv Sharma is a PE in another jurisdiction, but he's also an applicant for a comedy, license here. And he also used Michael Lauder, so the Dhruv Sharma guy also used Michael Lauder as a reference. So they all obviously know each other, and they're all in the same realm of doing this rail stuff, this rail signal information, which I don't know anything about. But all of his experiences in that area. So that to answer your question.
Okay.
It sounds
what-
good to me. It doesn't, I'm not too worried about the math part and the science.
No.
And there's apparently a big market in getting the signals right on the trains. So the experience is probably pretty valuable at this point.
Yeah.
But when you say only 1 year or 6 months experience under a PE in the US.
Yeah, well, so not necessarily because he did 3 years and 9 months of experience doing this same kind of stuff, install, maintain, troubleshoot, and repair advanced electronic equipment and systems, including, but I'm not going to read it all, but basically same kind of thing. And it all has to do with the signal stuff from 2013 to 2017, working for the Metropolitan Authority of Los Angeles. But none of that was under the experience of a licensed engineer. So, then then again, 2 years working for California, LHC MTA. Again, none of that under the, experience of a licensed engineer on all the same kind of work again. And the only part, so here's the only area that he has under it's for the same organization, but a different period from 2019 to 2021. That's the 1 year and 5 months experience under a licensed engineer. I don't know. Maybe this is one. Maybe this is one that somebody else should take a look at. Just to, I don't know. I think it's great experience. Of course, I don't know anything about signals engineering.
And maybe because it's such a specialty, part of engineering that, there's not a lot of people who need to be involved in the decision making. Either you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing, but there's, you don't need a redundancy, or, you wouldn't hire 2 people to do one person's job just because of the fact that you need 2 people. You would only hire one person. So I think that, once you get, adequate knowledge and experience in a certain discipline, that, basically you become your own supervisor, where, there is nobody who could, mentor you, and that you would have to recognize when you're out of your realm of knowledge and, pursue, another opinion. But I think that that's probably what you're encountering, is that it's such a specific discipline that there are not that many people that are doing it, and it's either you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing, and it's again.
Where is he working now? VHB is a big firm.
So currently he works. So currently he works for VHB, which is of course how he. Yeah.
In Los Angeles still?
He started there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I said working for VHB here on the East Coast.
So he, in New York, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I got no problem. I would agree. I think the rail signalization is a big deal, especially in New York.
And the railroads train their own too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then in that regard, then based on this conversation, I would recommend approval for him.
I'll
So
make
is
the
there a
motion.
motion to accept the recommendation, Robert?
I will.
Bob?
Yep, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thanks, Al. All those in favor of the motion to approve Rami Yunan for Class 4 reciprocity, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Our next group of applicants for Class 9 license is listed from Ansich to Zakharov. there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So,
Thank you, Richard.
second,
Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carried. And John reviewed 2 applicants.
I'm waiting for you to pronounce the
I
name.
know.
Tony.
I've been waiting for somebody to say that. So let's see. Ogun Ujemeti, Ogun Ojemeti, and Mr. Sajid.
Okay. The first one has a South African bachelor's that was reviewed, and he's missing 3 hours of general ed, but otherwise it's fine. And the second one is from Pakistan, and he's missing 2 hours of gen ed. The second one actually could be applying for both exams, but nevertheless, they're both acceptable, and I move approval to both of them for class 10 license.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That's 10. Okay. Now we move on to page 8. We have one reinstatement for Scott Seaball, reviewed by Bob Doan.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. I had the wrong page. I make a motion to approve for reinstatement.
I'll second.
Second,
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Continuously licensed in another state.
Yep.
All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Which brings us to our supplemental agenda. We'll do the applications first, if you don't mind. And the first 3 applications for Class 1 Credit Part 1 reviewed by John DeWolf, Courchain, Gendron, and Lamore.
okay, the first one is model law. And they're all acceptable, but I have one question on Gendron. He has 5 recommendations. The only supervisor he has had is his father, and he's not one of the recommenders. I'm assuming everything is okay, so I'm going to move approval of all of them.
Yeah.
They're not talking.
There a second?
Second.
Think about it. All those in favor of the motion to approve Courchain, Gendron, and Lamore for Class 1 Credit Part 1, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Richard Sweetak reviewed the next group of applications for Class 4 reciprocity, Allen through Cowley, on page 2 of the supplemental agenda.
I guess they're all model law except Mr. Al Samari, who has a degree out of Iraq, and he's missing some science courses, but he had significant engineering and other, courses to make up for that. So I'll make a motion that we approve all 7 of them.
There's
Second.
John. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Rob Lewandowski reviewed the next group of applicants, and he recommends approval of all. He made a comment about Machado, only in that he has an undergraduate from Venezuela with 158 credits and a graduate master's from Georgia Tech. But for some reason, NCWS evaluated, said not equivalent, due to missing a biology course. With 158 credits. Good for him.
Wow.
So you just see again the evaluation. What are you thinking? You know, they're not consistent, so we have to stay on our own even keel. Therefore, Rob has recommended approval of all the applicants, Chialco through Machado, for Class 4 reciprocity on page 2 of the supplemental agenda. Therefore, is there a motion to accept his recommendation?
So moved.
I'll make that motion, Tony.
I'll second.
Thank you both. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And then Ryan reviewed the last group, Nice, Pop, Roder, Sharma, and Steeb. And there's the Sharma you were talking about a moment ago.
That's right. Yeah, and all of them are model law. I recommend all of them.
I'll
A
make that
motion to
motion.
accept. Yeah, Richard,
I'll make that motion. To accept.
second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Al. All those in favor of the motion to approve Nice, Pops, Roder, Sharma, and Steve for Class 4 reciprocity, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And then we have two more reinstatements that were reviewed by Bob Doan, Obsi, and Viana.
For Opsi, he's a professor. He was educated in Turkey. He has a, which is, was deemed equivalent. He's teaching in Qatar right now in the United Kingdom. He is has a master's from Virginia Tech, has a PhD from Virginia Tech, both in civil engineering. And I was concerned that his license had lapsed in 2013, and he is not licensed in any other state. But he has extremely extensive academic experience in teaching continuously. And I make a motion to approve. He's paid over $3,000 in back fees. And when I first looked at it, I was thinking that perhaps he should just reapply for engineering. He has the exams and everything and the experience. But we can't do that under our regs, and he has to renew it because he was previously licensed.
Good. So
I'll
the
second,
motion is to reinstate both.
and I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Which leads us to the correspondence on our supplemental agenda. First one was item AA1. The question raised, does our Connecticut state licensing law require a dust hazard analysis report to be signed and sealed by a PE? This gentleman, representing the Southeastern Council of Governments, suggests that dust hazard control is an engineering specialty with its own National Association of Dust and Explosion Hazard Engineers. Using the term engineer, I don't know if there's a discipline specific and who performs these studies. Is it an HVAC discipline or a MEP? I'm not aware of an NCAAS exam specific to what do you call it? Dust hazard control. So Is that under fire protection? Is it covered under fire protection exam?
It seems to me if the Connecticut State Building Code and fire codes have this regulation for dust control, it seems to me that the criteria here is whether they require PE, and it's up to those codes to determine that.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that's an engineering evaluation or not.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, whether or not it's an item or module or question bank within mechanical engineering.
Well, I think it needs to be done by a specialty contractor so that, and normally, it's, similar to, the pre-engineered buildings or the tower, systems that we see, or the solar, systems that we see, where, you have an entity that specializes in a certain discipline, and then they're licensed in a number of different states in order to do evaluations. And that's probably, what you would be looking for is that specialty company that does that kind of a work, and they probably are going to be registered, because of the fact that, they're doing it, in all these different states. So, and I would agree that falls, along the lines of where, Mr. DeWolf had indicated, is that, it's really should be defined by the, the code as to what is required, because of the fact that it's a specialty item.
Well,
So if the
I
code
don't know
doesn't-
how we can answer this question.
Yeah.
The answer, I think, is if the code doesn't require PE, then
Right.
PE is not needed.
But it would have to be done by somebody who's qualified to do it,
Right.
which
I
is
think
that specialty
that's-
company.
That's up to that code. That's not our jurisdiction. Just like
right.
Pratt & Whitney designs jet engines. Those are done by engineers, but it's not required that you have a PE.
Right. I think that's a simple answer that we can address to him. We've considered your question, but it's governed under the building code, and it's not under the jurisdiction or the purview of this board. We do that, Jane?
Yes, I can send that along.
Right? Just say it's not the purview of the board. Or dust hazard control is not a purview of the board. State building code controls or requires the analysis, and it shall be done in accordance with building code. Or simply stated, it's not under the purview of the board. And the analysis shall be done in accordance with the state building code.
Yeah, well, you got two codes in there. You got the fire codes and you got the building code, two different
Say
ones. You got a
both, right.
fire marshal on one side and the
Yeah,
building inspector on the other, but it's not in our area expertise.
so the simple answer, or simple response is the board considered your inquiry. The dust hazard control shall be analysis. The dust hazard control shall be in accordance with the Connecticut State Building and Fire Codes. That's sufficient?
Yep.
You want to draft something, Jane, I'd be glad to look at it, or John or Al. Al probably has more experience in regulations like that, but I'd be glad to look at it, and I think we should. The next applicant, AA2, is from NCWS, suggesting that there's going to be a ceremonial signing of a UK mutual recognition agreement. It'll be signed on August 13th, a Tuesday afternoon. Anybody wants to attend, you're welcome. The
Only,
that,
I
Tony,
won't be
is
there.
is
What was
that
that?
agreement? Tony, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Does that agreement mean that NCEES is stating that if you're licensed in the UK, that's adequate for being licensed in the US?
It would imply that to me. I have not seen it, nor have I been aware of it. I guess it was somewhat like the agreement with Canada.
So, but what I'm concerned about is I think in the UK, at least it used to be, and I've had sabbaticals there, that if you got an undergraduate engineering degree, you automatically became licensed. No exams, no experience.
It was like that case that we had where the gentleman was incarcerated, but that's what his claim was. I'm a licensed engineer, so called in Great Britain, therefore I should be licensed in Connecticut. And that was a very awkward situation, but you may be right. So I think that we ought to know what it says, although at this moment I don't.
Is NCEES really going all out to destroy their regulations?
You may be right in that assumption. They're also in the business of generating income,
Ah,
to support the exams. So the financial report every year is a big deal. How many exams are we producing? Why are we down this year? What happened, So expanding that. At one point, they were trying to find a way to have foreign degree testing sites. How many applicants could they get in India and pass the national exam here? I don't know where it's going. We should probably find out what that is when it becomes official. I'm going to put that in this other pile. That's going to be questions at the right time in May. What the heck is this thing? All right. So we answered AA1, AA2, AA3. Sometimes you say, where do these questions come from? Okay. It passed through our office once. We looked at it and looked at it again. And this plan that had come into us from another client, the seal said, official seal, state of Connecticut. And it was like, it looked at first glance, it was an official seal. That's all it said. And it was suggesting that it was an engineering seal. Anyway, now in this case, I guess what the town engineer in Newtown is suggesting is that somebody copied his stamp and used it. Well, the first thing you got to do, I think, is talk to a lawyer. If nothing else, it's fraud. If the next step, it's probably theft of service. I don't know what the term would be. And I don't know if there's any reasonable or feasible way that a regulation could say the stamp company has to verify licensure. How are they going to do that? Oh, Jimmy Jones called up Jane and said, "Is Frank licensed?" Yes. Okay, then I can make a stamp. What have you accomplished? When Jimmy Jones didn't know that his stamp was being made. I think that John Curtis is suffering from theft.
Yeah.
Of his integrity.
I suggest he turns it over to the town attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think though that the point that we could probably address is what information is publicly available. And I don't know that we can address it or not, but basically what he's saying is my name, my address, and my license number are all searchable online, and everybody's is, and that is the case for every state. And I think that's his concern, is that you can just go on, type in a name, get the information, send it to a stamp company, get a stamp, and start stamping things. So that's.
But how would I check on your credentials then, Ryan? I'm going to call the state. Brian is offering services. Is he licensed? The answer is yes.
Yeah, I don't know that there's an answer or that there's a solution to it, but But I think that's his point. Is there a way that, and I mean, there is a way that you could, make it a little bit easier. I mean, you could put your address as, your business address as opposed to your home address or something. I don't know, but
If you read our regulations, we talk about, and it was debated for so many years, and now we've all professionally ignored it, that it's not official unless you have a live stamp or seal. And then all of a sudden, how is that qualified anymore? None of us could be operating in business if we had to send a paper copy every time we made an addendum,
Yeah.
since they happen 5 times a day lately. So, that was the idea under the regulation. You're supposed to have a live seal on it. Well, if he's receiving the information in his own town and he didn't sign it, then obviously it's not legal.
Yeah.
But this is the implication in here is that perhaps it's being done over in the adjacent town or another town.
yeah.
He did some residential work on a property in Connecticut, out of state, claimed that this engineer would be able to do it. So what did he do? Just pick a name out of the hat and say, we're going to go pick on John Curtis?
Maybe it kind of sounds like it, random.
Well, I would say what you suggested, Ryan, is that you should talk to your town attorney on this.
Yeah.
As a start,
Yeah.
he represents you, and if it's,
This is interesting, though. This is a new town, and the one before that was Bosworth, Franklin, Preston, Montville. You could put Salem in there. The little towns are having problems, I guess, getting, people to work for them.
right.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's the Upwork, if you hire somebody on the internet and they take your money and then they say, oh, go talk to this guy, he'll stamp it. And then when he says, no, I can't do that, the person on the internet that hired the Upwork guy is out a bunch of money and doesn't have an approved set of plans. And and then you have an engineer local that's been implicated. That's a problem. So.
Well, in this case, I think your suggestion to consult your town attorney initially as to whether or not, I don't even make an opinion. You should take this issue to your town attorney initially for advice.
Mhm.
Because I don't know how we could stop it, and we're certainly not able to change a regulation. So I don't say how, I don't know what else you could possibly do.
I
To
think the
protect
only
the
thing,
public, they have to be able to
It's-
call the board and say, is John Jones licensed? Is he current? Is he registered? The answer is yes, then that's the end of it. And I don't know how you tell the stamp company that he can't make a stamp when requested. We never send our license to the stamp company when we request a license for a new licensee. We did 4 last year. Called them up. Matthew's, licensed now, make him a stamp.
I
So-
think the only thing we can do is when fraud has happened, then they can file a complaint to the board and it can be investigated.
And the problem there is that chances are it's a site contractor taking a plan, having, Frank draw him a plan that he puts this guy's seal on it. And as far as anybody knows, he went to, let's say, Bosworth, like Al suggested, he goes to the next town over, town engineer over in Newtown signed it, must be good.
Mm.
And the only protection is you didn't have a blue ink signature on it. My motion would be to suggest that he consult his town attorney as to the appropriate course of action, assuming that it's happening in Newtown.
I'll make that motion, Tony. It's the sign of the times, you can,
Yeah.
everything can be copied, forfeited, forged. And yeah, it's what we're up against.
There's a second to the motion to advise John Curtis, PE, to consult his town attorney, as a first step. Is there a
Second,
second? Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion to respond to Mr. John Curtis that he should consult his town attorney as the period. But there's not enough information here anyway to know whether or not he was suggesting that it was being done in another jurisdiction or another town, but how did he become aware of it? You know? But he needs an attorney to start because he has to protect his integrity. I don't know if we had a motion or not. And we have a motion in a second. I can't remember if we voted. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I apologize for jumping. Because the next one, it's the same question that's come up more than once. As I drive along I-95 through Stamford, they just finished a new public garage state design. On the outside is a garish, in my opinion, extremely ugly facade made out of some kind of metalwork. And we were involved in providing some control for the clips. And these are heavy, large panels. So in this case, this guy is designing some materials, including aluminum architectural products, louvers, grills, sunshades. And all I can think of is one of those clips fails, the panel falls off and kills somebody. Now, what you consider the public because you didn't do it for Al Regina? No, it's the fact is you offered it to your clients who are purchasing the piece. In my opinion, if you have an engineer on your staff signing documents, then that company should be registered. That firm is offering services to the public, whether it's an individual or another company.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
I think that the company represented by the PE needs to be licensed. That would be my response.
I'll make that motion, Tony.
For a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Al. So the motion is to advise Mr. Chuck Almer, Vice President, General Counsel, that the company represented by a PE needs to be licensed, period, needs to be.
Yeah.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
So Jane, that's a simple letter. It's always like the board reviewed your inquiry. The consensus of the board was that the company represented by a professional engineer needs to be licensed in the state of Connecticut.
Well, it's authorization to practice in the state of Connecticut. The corporation needs to be authorized to work in the state.
Good. It needs to be authorized for what was that, Bob saying? It needs to be authorized.
Yeah, I was opening up my cheat sheet, but I can't find it in all my paperwork, but yeah, they need to apply for a certificate of authorization to work in the state of Connecticut because they are practicing engineering.
Yeah, to operate. So you have to be licensed. First you have to be registered.
Yeah.
For the secretary, then you have to be licensed.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, Jay, if you want to draft it up in form and send it off to a couple of us, then we can do it. But in the meantime, all those in favor of the motion to respond in kind to Chuck Almer, Vice President, General Counsel, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And I believe that was the last of our correspondence and completes our supplemental agenda. We did have two items, AA3, but I took them in order. Actually, the last one was AA4, but on our sheet, it was AA3. But I'm going to make a little edit there. That's it. Is there any other new or old business?
I just received an email from somebody who used to work for Pratt and Whitney that had contacted, us in 2016 and wondered, how difficult was it to get licensed in the state or get licensed, and I guess we had indicated that, it was fairly easy, and he did email me and says, turns out I eventually got my PE license. I have to thank you for your advice all those years ago. And recently I went to Hamilton Standard, or, what do they call themselves now? But and sort of discussed, the aspect of getting, I guess registered in the state. And I had indicated that, their biggest concern was the fact that they needed, 5 engineers as references in order to get, to take the exam. And I had indicated that, obviously in a large, corporation similar to that, where there are few, registered engineers, that, we would take into consideration, their plight, and that, there probably is a network of engineers there that they don't necessarily have direct contact with, that might be able to give them some reference, but that, we would sort of judge their applications on a per application, situation, rather than, just take it as a blanket statement that you have to have all these engineers, providing you with references. So I'm not sure if that was consistent with what our feeling is, or whether, we should have some kind of a policy for that.
You mean like to reduce the number of references? Or
Well, the thing
recognizing
was,
that it's difficult sometimes in a large corporation to get somebody's license?
correct. Where there's so little, people who are licensed that are supervisors, in terms of, you can work for the same person for, 8 or 10 or 15 years. And if he's not licensed, basically, you're not working under, a licensed professional engineer. And if there's not that many engineers in the company that are licensed, that your interaction with those engineers is not necessarily, professional, or, in terms of, they exactly know what you're doing or have personal contact with you.
Well, I think it's come up a couple of times that we can recall. I can't recall specifics, but the guy gets out, goes to work for himself. He's been working at it for 4 or 5 years. He didn't have any references. He got other other colleagues. He should be able to find somebody. But you're saying, and I understand, if you're working in a firm and you want to be licensed because you enjoy the work, but you've never had any public contact or with other firms,
Right.
I understand it's a problem. It could be a problem, but it's fairly unique.
Correct. And like you said, I did get, I guess this David Barna contacted me back in 2016, and I encouraged him to be, to get registered. And again, I'm not sure exactly, how he went about getting registered, but he did send me a little note that I received yesterday. It says, hooray, I'm glad you told me that I should get, registered as a professional engineer, and I finally did it. So,
but then he said, but it was difficult getting references.
well, no. I guess, when I went to, the old Hamilton Standard building, and I gave a presentation to the engineers there about getting, registered as a professional engineer, and, taking the fundamentals early, and the fact that, one of the questions that what was posed to me is that, there are a few registered professional engineers that work in that organization, as big as it is, even though there's 60,000 people working there or whatever, that they don't have access to, professional engineers who know exactly, what their work involves and that could vouch for them for their professional, design prowess or, whatever, So it's that, situation where, they don't have access to somebody who
Right.
is an engineer.
I think the only response is we'll have to take it on that case by case basis. If the guy comes in, look, I've been working for Hamilton Standard for 25 years and I've only had 2 bosses. I want to be a licensed engineer. So tell us
Right.
that.
Right.
know?
And then that's what I told them is that, we would consider each application individually, not necessarily,
Right.
get too hung up on, the requirements based upon, what their background and their history is.
All right. That's good. Any other new business? If not,
Motion to adjourn?
thank you, Al.
Second.
Thanks, Richard. All right, appreciate it. What's
We
our next
need-
one, Jane?
June
11th.
11th.
June, okay.
June 11th. Yep.
I have it on the list. I have the list, but I would just like to have it closed out. See if you're still there.
I'm
All
still
right.
here.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jane.
All right.
Take
Be
care.
good.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good month of May.
Take care.
Yep.
Goodbye.